Hi, good morning. Welcome to your next math lesson. Go ahead and get a piece of scratch paper ready. Actually, not scratch paper. Take your math notebook out so that you can take notes as I go through this lesson with you. At the top of the page, write prime factorization. Because that is what today's lesson is about. Before we get into what prime factorization is, let's do a little review. You should recall from yesterday's lesson, or from your last lesson, that a factor is a number multiplied by another number. Okay? So that means that when we're looking for factors of numbers, what we're looking for is whatever numbers can be multiplied together to equal the number we're finding factors for. So if we're looking, let's say we're finding factors of 8. That means we find all the numbers that can be multiplied together to equal 8. So 1 and 8 are both factors of 8 because 1 times 8 equals 8. And 2 and 4 are both factors of 8 because 2 times 4 equals 8. So that means all the factor, and those are the only numbers that can be multiplied together to equal 8. 1, 2, 4, and 8. So if we're going to take all the factors for 8 and put them in order from least to greatest, it would be 1, 2, 4, and 8. That's what factors are. So what is prime factorization? Okay, prime factorization is when you write a composite number as the product of its prime factors. That's what prime factorization is. Writing a composite number as the product of its prime factors. And probably you're looking at that definition of prime factorization and you're not quite sure what it means. Well, it'll become a lot more clear when we go over some examples together. But there's two vocab words in there, composite and prime. Remember from your last lesson that a composite number is any number that has 3 or more factors. So 8 is a composite number because it has 3 or more factors. Whereas a number like 7 is a prime number because the only two numbers in the world that can equal 7 are 1 and 7. 1 times 7 is the only way to get 7. So the only factors of 7 are 1 and 7, which makes 7 a prime number. Okay? That's all the review that we needed to do before actually doing some prime factorization examples. So how do we do prime factorization? The answer is by factor trees. Okay, so let's start by doing an example with the number 36. You always start with the number that you're doing prime factorization for. And then you turn it into a factor tree. So the number sprouts branches, except they don't go up, they go down. So they're kind of maybe a little bit more like roots. Okay, and then each branch sprouts a leaf. And what is each leaf? It's a factor of the number that you're doing prime factorization on. So you can just pick any two numbers that equal 36. Okay, like you could pick 3 and 12 because 3 times 12 equals 36. And what you do next is you take a look at these numbers and you decide if either of them are prime. Any number that's prime just gets dropped down. But any number that's composite, that means it has 3 or more factors, sprouts more branches. And you do the same thing with this number. that you did with this one. You pick any two numbers that can equal 12. So you could pick 3 and 4, or you could pick 2 and 6. Let's go ahead and pick 2 and 6. Now we look at these three numbers. We already know 3 is prime, so it drops down. 2 is prime as well because it only has two factors, 1 and 2, so 2 drops down. 6 is not prime because it has more than two factors, so 6 sprouts branches. And now we pick two numbers that can be multiplied together to equal 6. Oh, and you can never pick 1 and the number itself, so we can't pick 1 and 6, or else it doesn't help us. Okay, so 2 times 3 is 6. And now we have all prime numbers. So once you get to the bottom, you circle the prime numbers, and that's the prime factorization. But you don't just leave it like that. You write it out going from the smallest numbers to the larger numbers, and you put a multiplication sign between each number. So 2, that's this one, times 2, that's this one, times 3, that's this one, times 3, that's this one. 2 times 3, 2 times 2 times 3 times 3. And you know you did it right if it equals the number you started with, 36. So let's see if it does. 2 times 2 is 4, times 3 is 12, times 3 is 36. So we know we did it correctly because it ends up equaling 36 at the end. Let's do another example of prime factorization together. Let's try with the number 24. So step 1, the number that you're doing prime factorization on sprouts branches. And each branch grows a leaf. And what is that leaf? It's a number that can be multiplied by another number to equal 24. So you can pick any two numbers that can be multiplied together to equal 24. You could pick 2 and 12. You could pick 3 and 8. Let's do 2 and 12. Okay, now we look at these two numbers. We decide if either of them are prime. 2 is prime because it only has two factors, 1 and 2, so 2 drops down. 12 is composite because there's more than two numbers that can be multiplied together to equal 12. So we drop it down. It sprouts branches. Now, let's do 3 and 4 this time because 3 times 4 equals 12. 2 is prime. 3 is prime as well, so they drop down. 4 is composite, so it sprouts branches. And 2 times 2 equals 4. And that's the prime factorization for 24. Okay, 2 times 2 times 2 times 3. And if we did it right, it equals 24. 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 3 is 24. So we know we did it correctly. Let's do another example together, and if you have to turn your paper over like me, go ahead. Let's try doing it for the number 18. Now, why don't you go ahead and pause the video and do this one independently? And then you can press start on the video, watch me do it, and you can see if you did it correctly or not. Okay, hopefully you followed those directions. Hopefully you paused the video and you tried to do the prime factorization for 18 independently. And now let's correct it together. So what you do is 18 sprouts branches, and you pick any two numbers that can be multiplied together to equal 18. So you could have picked 3 and 6, or you could have picked 2 and 9. I'm going to do 2 and 9. Now, if you have 3 and 6 there, that's fine too. What matters is that you get the same answer at the end. You don't have to make your tree the exact same way. Now we look at 2 and 9 and decide if either of them are prime. 2 is prime because it only has two factors, 1 and 2. 9 is not prime because 3 times 3 equals 9. Okay, now we look at these numbers and decide if they're prime. We already know 2 is, but 3 and 3 are also prime. That means we're done. And now the prime factorization is 2 times 3 times 3. And we know we did it right if it equals 18. 2 times 3 is 6. Times 3 is 18. Okay, let's do another example together. Let's do 40. Go ahead again, pause the video and do the prime factorization for 40 independently. See if you can do it by yourself. And then when you're finished, press play. Okay, hopefully you did what you were supposed to do and you paused the video and you did the prime factorization for 40 and then you pressed play. Now you can see if you did it correctly. So there's lots of different numbers you could choose that can be multiplied together to equal 40, or there's at least a few different options. You could have picked 4 times 10. Now if you picked something else, maybe you did 2 times 20, as long as you get the same answer at the end, you still got it correct, because there's different options when you're making your factor tree. Okay, now we look at 4 and 10. Neither of them are prime because they both have more than 2 factors. So 4 sprouts branches, and 2 times 2 equals 4. And then 10 sprouts branches, and 2 times 5 equals 10. Now we look at these and we decide if any of them are prime. 2 is prime, so that means these two are also prime, and 5 is prime too, because nothing times anything equals 5 except for 1 times 5. That's why 5 is prime. So that means with this one, we're already done. The prime factorization is 2 times 2 times 2 times 5. And we know we got it right if it equals 40. 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 5 is 40. Okay, now make sure you also click on the assignment attached below, and I will catch you guys next time.